welcome back to another episode of Jason's Game Room, the only podcast here on YouTube that talks about everything gaming, from board games to video games to dice games to CCGs. Did you like my Pog episode? Everybody loves Pog. Pog, 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 Pog. If it has anything to do at all with gaming, it is going to be on this show, and you're going to want to keep tuning in to see what I'm talking about next. Now, a little while back, I did an episode on the Continuing Committee, and they are the organization that took over the Star Trek CCG 1E and 2E from Decipher when Decipher ended up going under, and you all know how I feel about them. Well, I wanted to add this episode as a continuation, but in this case, I want to talk about the rise and fall of Decipher as a whole in regards to the Star Trek CCG. And I'm not going to talk about the company and its history. I want to talk about the company as it was throughout the Star Trek card game and why everything ended up tanking the way it did. And it's a very complex set of variables because everyone has to remember that when CCGs exploded on the scene, and I'm talking back in 1993 with the advent of Magic the Gathering, because that was the CCG that started it all. You've heard me talk about that time and time again on this show and also on the basics. When Decipher came out with the Star Trek CCG in 1994, and later in that effect when they came out with the Star Wars CCG, they added a whole new dimension to gameplay, and they added something for sci-fi fans to go for, whereas Magic the Gathering was targeted for just about anyone. The Star Trek CCG was targeted specifically for Trekkies and Trekkers and all the Star Trek fans, and the Star Wars CCG was targeted towards Star Wars fans. Now, as a fan of both universes, I did end up playing both at one period of time, but I always stuck with the Star Trek CCG, first and foremost because Star Trek was one of my first big passions in life. Now, when they came out with the game, it was very simplistic. It was based off Star Trek Next Generation, came out in 60-card starter decks and 15-card boosters, and they stuck with the license of the Next Generation, and you can tell from the first few expansions, like the Alternate Universe and Q Continuum and whatnot, that everything was based in that world. When they expanded on the licenses for the different Star Trek products out there, more and more expansions came out with differing and varying card sets. You had First Contact, you had Deep Space Nine, several expansions after Deep Space Nine that dealt with Deep Space Nine and the races involved. You had Voyager, you had the Borg, you started having the motion pictures, holodeck adventures that covered pretty much everything through any series. You even had, right near the end, the very small and short-lived Enterprise collection based on Star Trek Enterprise, which was a gaffe in itself, but I'm not getting into that. The main problem that Decipher started happening, and a lot of people will say, well, the game didn't go downhill to the early 2000s. Not exactly true. You can start tracing the downfall of the game in the mid to late 90s. And you're going to probably ask me why. So you have to look at it this way. After some of the successful expansions came out on the market, which would be First Contact in 1997, Deep Space Nine in 1998, you had the Dominion in 1999, Blaze of Glory in late 1999. This was one of the first problems for the game. Now, a lot of people enjoy that expansion that Decipher put out. I am one of those people that does not hate it, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. Yes, it did introduce some great cards to the game, and Decipher came up with this notion that the battle aspect of the game needed to be fixed. So in that expansion, and you've heard me expand about this on previous episodes of both my shows, Blaze of Glory came out with the Battle Bridge side deck and the tactic cards. Now, was there anything wrong with the battle mechanic? No. In my opinion, no. And in a lot of players' opinion, no. It was a very simplistic battle mechanic done with math. You'd rotate the card, or aka the starship, on the damage, and any battle done by away teams was done with weapons through equipment cards, and it would be strength and integrity and all that and cunning, more math, but it would get the job done. The problem with adding another card type, especially one that was solely focused on battle, you have to remember the Battle Bridge side deck was all tactic cards. It was not like your Q's tent when you could have varying cards of anything you wanted in there. Because the tactic cards came with their own mini rules, and this is not just a card rotation, but instead of just doing overall damage to the ship like it used to be for so long, you'd have damage done to shields, weapons would be knocked offline, a random personnel would be killed, an engineering team would be killed, weapons would be knocked offline, damage to your warp core, a breach was initiated. While I do agree the battle mechanic of the game could have been expanded on a little more, this was taking it a little too far. And this was the start of the downfall of Decipher in the Star Trek CCG. Now, fast forward a few years. We're into the year 2000 now, and the second anthology had just come out in March. That was an interesting set. I never minded the anthology series of sets, and they had those extra cards in them, a 6-pack that would give you some cool dynamic characters for the game. Then they came out with The Trouble with Tribbles. Now that introduced the original series, which was fine. Decipher picked up the license for the original series, and it was great. We wanted to see some of that. Had the original crew, it had a lot of cool cards. But what it did was lead to the Tribbles CCG a couple months later, and it was very short-lived. There's still the odd tournament today you can go to in regards to the Star Trek CCG, and you can play the Tribble CCG, but mixing in some of the Tribble CCG cards with the original series decks is just why? They should have marketed it as a separate game completely and kept it away from the Star Trek CCG 1E and marketed it differently, including some of the cards here and there from the Tribble CCG with the original series expansion. In my mind, it took up space that could have had more cool original series cards in those starter decks or booster packs or whatever they came in. And it was annoying to see you'd open a package and the rare card would be a Tribble CCG card. Why? Why did we need that? Now, skipping ahead another year or two, we're moving into past when Mirror Mirror expansion came out in December 2000. Voyager came out. And then the Borg expansion came out almost a year after that. Now, a lot of people will say Decipher started screwing up heavily when Voyager came out, because a lot of the luster was off of the Star Trek CCG at that time. And now Decipher was just grabbing licenses and putting out sets to make money. I liked the Voyager expansion because it introduced the Delta Quadrant as well as 2 more affiliations, being the Kazon and the Vidians. And you could play solely in the Delta Quadrant if you wanted, just like when the Gamma Quadrant expansion came out for the Deep Space Nine series of sets. It was great. The problem, I think, that really furthered Decipher's issue with the game and them sliding into a downhill spiral was All Good Things. And we're now into 2003. The game has lost a lot of its luster because it's been 2 years since an expansion now. You could tell that something was going on because Decipher started really slowing down with the expansions, and they had promised, and several articles in gaming magazines were written at the time, they had promised that expansions were going to start up again every year at least, with extra licenses they were acquiring. They were going to add movies like Insurrection, Nemesis as full expansions. They were going to do a lot of different things with the game. It was hard to get excited because Holodeck Adventures had come out a couple years prior, and it was a bit of a bust. It has some fun cards, but it was a bit of a bust. There was just too much focus on a lot of the aspects of the holodecks, which we really didn't need in the game. If you've played since the beginning, you'll understand why I'm a bit hot and cold towards Holodeck Adventures. But All Good Things started the immediate and sudden downfall of the game, because after all those years, the game had been almost out 10 years at this point. Decipher just decided, we're going to fix all the broken links now, all at once, in one set. The game had been going quite well up until Blaze of Glory. The broken links really didn't need to get fixed, because one of the problems with Decipher is they did not listen to their target audience. As players, especially us that had been playing since the game came out, we found ways around the odd broken link in the game here and there, and we were just fine with it. They didn't need to suddenly, 10 years after the fact, decide, yeah, we're going to do this right now because you guys don't know what you're doing. And that's what it was. And one of the articles in Scry magazine that talked about this right after, I don't have that Scry anymore, unfortunately, they dissed it and didn't like it right away. And I agreed with their article because they pointed out how insane it was to put out a fix a decade after the game came out, when we really needed that fix around the time Q Continuum expansion came out to fix a couple of mechanics going into the First Contact expansion. We didn't get it. But at this point, Decipher was more concerned about acquiring licenses and making gobs of money, thinking that, oh, Star Trek fans are stupid, they live in their parents' basements and they have tons of money, we're just going to keep doing it this way and make a ton of coin. Well, it didn't work. What ended up happening? A lot of people, including longtime players like myself, suddenly just stopped buying expansions. The last set that I actually spent money on was the Borg. I bought a little bit of Voyager, I bought a little bit of the Borg, and I acquired some Holodeck Adventures cards and Motion Pictures cards via trades from extras I had from other sets. I didn't spend any money on those sets. And it was just disappointing to see Decipher gone into this downward spiral. And then, of course, they came up with Second Edition. Second Edition was launched in 2002, so not only are they starting in a downward spiral with 1E, they come out with 2E that nobody wanted, nobody asked for, and they said, we're going to make a couple of the last expansions in 1E compatible with 2E. Great, so I have to have two different kinds of cards now to play the game if I want to play in certain aspects of tournaments. It never made sense back then. It still doesn't make sense to this day. As I've said before, I hardly know anyone, if anyone, plays 2E. There's some people that like the card designs. It has cool card art and pictures and whatnot. But it sucks. It was never needed. It was never wanted. Decipher became one of those classic companies where instead of listening to what the people wanted, and this is the same people that are spending money to buy this product off that company to play the game, they went out and started pretty much telling all the players, you don't know what you want. We know what you want. This is what you want. We're putting you out. Go and buy it. Well, unfortunately, that's why Decipher went into that big spiral, and both games ended up going bust. Luckily, at that point, the continuing committee did take it over, although you know my thoughts on them and how they went and where they spiraled into. But Decipher had a chance to fix 1E, make it better, and not bring out 2E and screw themselves over. And all they had to do was listen to us, the people that spend the money and play the game. But instead, they dictated what we wanted rather than what we said we wanted, and there you go. It's very simple. They stopped listening to the people who kept their company going. And in turn, we stopped buying the game. They decided to come out with 2E. It didn't work. They went down the hill. It's a classic failure of a business model. They had it going so well. They did the same thing with the Star Wars card game in a very short amount of time. And that should have been a warning. But, you know, corporations going to be corporations. They're going to get greedy, stupid, and go down the tubes in a very short period of time. And they did. Anyways, that's all for today. I don't want to ramble on for too long, even though you know I can about Decipher and the Star Trek CCG and the continuing committee, mainly because I've been involved with this game ever since it came out, and I'm very passionate about it. But that's all for today. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Hell, take a can of spray paint and spray paint JGR rules somewhere outside on the pavement. Providing if you get caught. You know, I never told you to do that. Have a great day, everybody. And don't forget to always game on.